In the UK, you're not legally entitled to any time off work if you experience miscarriage in the first 24 weeks of pregnancy. You do have maternity rights after 24 weeks of pregnancy when it comes to pay and leave. But today the Women and Equalities Select Committee is hearing evidence for the case of extending your right to bereavement leave to include those first 24 weeks. Before we came on air, I got to speak to Sarah Owen. She's Labour MP for Luton North. She's chair of that committee. And I asked her why it's so important to have this conversation.
I think this is a priority because it happens to so many women and it affects so many families across the country. We've had a lot of progress in other areas of women's reproductive health, but I feel that this area of miscarriage, and particularly bereavement leave for miscarriage, has been lacking.
What are you looking for?
So the inquiry that started this week by hearing from people's personal testimonies, we'd heard from women who'd had up to 10 miscarriages and actually wanted to do something very different each time, and it affected them in different ways. So first of all, we want to look at why it's needed, how employers can do this and why some are choosing to do this. We'll be hearing from the NHS and Dentsu today. And does it need legislation to force all employers to do it?
And what do you think at first blush?
I don't want to predetermine the outcomes and the recommendations, but from what we've heard, there is such a mixture of experience out there. There are some really good employers. There's really good management skills out there, but actually it has been lacking for a large number of women, particularly women in insecure work or in low-paid jobs.
And so if somebody miscarries in those first 24 weeks, what are they eligible for?
It depends on their employer's policies, but legally they're not entitled to anything other than sick leave.
My understanding, you talk about personal testimony that you have been hearing, and I'm sure it's very moving. I know you yourself have had personal experience of it, if you're comfortable speaking about that.
I am. I've had 3 miscarriages since the age of 38. I'm 41 now. 2 while we were trying to conceive my beautiful rainbow baby, and 1 following that. And each were very, very different and painful experiences for different reasons. And I wanted different things from my employer at different times. And one of them was whilst I was an MP as well.
And can you explain that a little, whether it's your experience, and I'm sorry for your losses, whether it's your own experience or what you've been hearing about what might be needed that's different in different scenarios?
I think it's women's choice, whether it's my experience or the women that we've heard from in this inquiry, or people that I've heard from in my constituency. It's choice. It's knowing that they have the choice to not choose sick leave, because it feels, it reinstates that there's something wrong with you. Mm-hmm. And quite often you will have something physically wrong with you. If you have to have a DNC procedure, you have to go under general anaesthetic. There's a lot of medical support there for you, and it may be physical, but also there is time to grieve. There needs to be time to grieve. Otherwise you store up problems later on. And I think that that's what some of the employers will be outlining today, that actually it saves time and money and also the individual pain in the long run.
And DNC, a procedure that people may need to undergo following a miscarriage. And I think with that as well, the first 24 weeks, it can be such a tricky area, depending on the employer as well, and the individual, over whether you want your employer to know you're trying for a baby.
Yes, and this is the problem that many women face. They don't want to be overlooked for promotion or a project, or to be seen as that person that's just wanting to start a family and that's their focus. I mean, even when I was shortly elected, I had a journalist ask me, I was 7.5 months pregnant when I was elected. And they were very much like, oh, well, you know, you're going to be going on leave. What's going to happen? And I explained the proxy system. I explained what was going to happen. And they were like, well, baby's always going to come first, which is a really shocking thing to say, because either you're left with, there's no right answer. You're either left with, no, baby doesn't come first and you're an awful mother, or yes, of course, baby comes first and you're an awful MP. So I think that we are in a place where actually we don't talk about pregnancy in the way that we do talk necessarily about menopause now. We've seen progress in this area, but I'd say that miscarriage and the journey of pregnancy isn't talked about enough. It is a complete myth that we see on television and in movies where a woman pees on a stick and you get the double line, and then it fast forwards to this montage where she's pregnant and there's baby showers and things. That's not the majority of women's experiences in getting pregnant and staying pregnant and having a baby. That's not the experience for many of us. It's a journey, and miscarriage, unfortunately, is a part of that for a quarter of all pregnancies.
And if there was statutory bereavement leave pre 24 weeks, do you think that could change the conversation, the culture?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's just knowing that we're entitled to that. I know that many women probably wouldn't take a huge amount of leave. It also means that they wouldn't be adding up or totaling up sick pay, which I know is a worry for many women workers. And it would stop the reinforcement that there is something wrong with your body, that there is something wrong with you, that you could have done something different, because in many cases you can't. And it actually acknowledges the loss. And it's not just the loss for the woman, it's the loss for the partner, for the husband, for the parents, both of them, that were expecting and hoping for a baby.
It is interesting, actually, just as you talk about that, and I suppose pulling back the veil in a way, if you know a colleague is on leave for that specific reason, I suppose it could make it a more compassionate workforce as well, because I imagine many women go back in without saying anything to anybody.
Absolutely. I've heard care workers talk about how they lied and said that they were off with flu. And actually then sensitive conversations can't, even with the best will in the world, colleagues will probably be insensitive by accident, and it causes unnecessary pain. And also it's not a healthy workplace where a woman's loss cannot be acknowledged. I had, in my second pregnancy loss, we actually went to a memorial, and in the team meeting I'd said, I'm going to a funeral. I didn't say who, and I would have said who normally, because I thought, maybe they might be thinking this is a bit silly, or why would you do this for somebody you never met? But actually you carried them, you knew them, you hoped for them, you imagined what they were like. And eventually I just said, actually, no, I want to tell you all why it is, where I'm going. And of course, they were incredibly supportive, the men and women there. And I'm really grateful to them, but they had to have the opportunity to do so, because otherwise they just didn't know.
That is incredibly moving, Sarah.
I think this is the experience that women have across the country. Like I say, that's why I think this inquiry is so important. We don't talk about it enough. And I am done with feeling like they were my secret, and they're not. They were part of our life, they're part of our family, they're part of my story, they're part of my body. And I think that it's time that society honours them and honours the fact that, we talk about maternity loss, we talk about maternity leave,
yes,
paternity leave. Why aren't we talking about miscarriage when this is part of a pregnancy journey, in the same way IVF is, the same way adoption is for some parenthood? There is a journey, and this is part of it. Pregnancy is not a simple thing for many people.
We've been speaking particularly about women's experiences, but of course there will be partners in this, men and women. Would potential statutory leave for miscarriage also extend to partners?
I think we'll look to the outcomes of the recommendations. I would say that there is an argument for it, given what we heard from the testimony from the women. One woman, she nearly died driving herself to A&E because she bled out. Her husband wasn't offered leave and had to go to work. And she drove herself to A&E. Like, that is shocking. When you have a D&C, as I say, you're put under general anaesthetic. You need a person to come out with you. You're not allowed to leave the hospital alone because you've been under GA and you've had an invasive procedure. So it is, in an ideal situation, you would have somebody with you every step of the way. And also, if you are on leave, what are you doing? Sat at home by yourself with your own thoughts? Actually, if you have time to grieve, you usually do that best with somebody else. So I think it is something that we'll be asking in the inquiry.
And we've been talking all about 24 weeks potential leave. How different is it post 24 weeks of pregnancy?
It is. You will get the maternity leave, you will get bereavement leave, and it is a very strict cut-off. I would hope that employers are flexible, but we do know that there are bad employers out there, and particularly that women are paid less, they're less secure in the workplace already. So actually tightening that up and recognising the loss pre-24 weeks is really important.
Is there a timeline on it, I should ask?
There is. We've got our inquiry today, but we are open to hearing as a committee, as Women and Equalities Committee, from hearing from people's experiences. So please do log on to our website, email us your experiences if you feel that you want to, and also to hear from employers that are doing this and that are finding it beneficial. And the reasons why they are is really important. And if you're a business as well that feels that this isn't for you, I do want to hear your concerns, because I think we have to address those and make sure that we lift the barriers for employers to be able to do this for all of their workforce.